Hello, welcome to the Ninjababes podcast. I am Kara Mack, and I'm here with Alex Katz. What's up, Alex? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be back on.
Yes, I'm excited to have you. So, Alex, you are a certified personal trainer, but you've been in the ninja world for a while. A lot of people know you. You're from Neighborhood Ninjas. You're like a familiar face to a lot of people. And I am excited to talk to you specifically today because you also have a master's in psychology. And so you have a lot of background in fitness and psychology or mindset or how we're thinking about our fitness or our performance and all those things. And as you know, it is September, October, rolling into October here, and ninja competitions are getting back into full swing. And, you know, it's also getting close to submission video season again, which is a lot to think about. And so everyone's kind of getting back into this mindset of like, go, go, go. I need to be performing. I need to be at my best. I need to be like ramping it up, getting ready for thinking about the next A&W season 14 and all this stuff. And, you know, something that I know I've brought up a lot on the podcast in the past years and that we talk about a lot is ninjas kind of like dealing with injury, but the mindset of how they work through it, or even on a larger scale than that, not just dealing with injury and the mindset, but dealing with any sort of training mindset in ninja, because we're going to get into this, but ninja is kind of like a hardcore community in the sense of like, we're go, go, go all the time. We don't take a lot of rest for ourselves. It's like, you know, sign up for all the competitions, like train at the gym every night. Like, you know, I think a lot of us are in the habit of like, we are full force into this, which is fun and awesome in a lot of ways, but can be too much sometimes. So last week on the podcast, we heard Emerson Muse talk about how she actually had developed an eating disorder and how she worked through that while being a ninja and then competing on A&W Junior. And she shared a lot about her journey, but on the kind of like on the out end of it, as she's been working through it and been in therapy, and she shared her whole story if people want to go back and listen. But she explained that she really had to rework how she looks at her training and how she thinks about her workouts and knowing when to slow down or stop or take a break or go eat more, you know, how to manage all of that without just getting sucked into the go, 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 more, you know, you're a ninja, you're hardcore, like just do it kind of a mindset. So today we're going to talk about all of that. I know I just spouted out a bunch of different things, but Alex is here to help us dive into all of that. And so we're going to start kind of with that topic of habits of overtraining and what that can look like. And it's going to lead us into a lot of different things. So, hey, Alex.
Hey, I think that was a great intro. And I'm actually going to take what you're talking about with Emerson as a starting off point, because I think, you know, Emerson sharing her story is absolutely amazing. And I think that that's something that's not talked about enough is the reasons why we overtrain, what our relationships are with ourselves, with our bodies, with food, with exercise, right? So something that I see very frequently with athletes, and even something that I experienced, is coming into a sport, having experienced, let's say, an eating disorder, right, in the past, and then using the sport to mask, right? So you go from eating disorder to now exercise disorder, which is actually a thing that I didn't know I had when I had it, right? And for anybody listening who doesn't know what that is, it's when you are, let's say, compulsively trying to control something in your life, like for instance, your body, through exercise. So you say, okay, I'm not restricting food anymore, or I don't have, you know, whatever issue with food. I'm just being healthy. I'm just competing all the time. I'm just training for the show. And so we're exercising a little bit too much. That could be one thing that we are experiencing that we don't even think about. Or maybe it is just that you feel like you need to keep up with everyone, right? I know a lot of us enter the sport and we're so excited. It's brand new. We're all about the community. We're having fun. We're training, right? We just want to get stronger. And then at some point, and I'm sure everyone listening can agree with us, at some point we go from, I just want to do cool things, to, I want to be the best. I want a podium. I want to get on A&W, right? Yeah. And so at some point it turns into Kara's like me, right? So at some point, same. At some point it becomes too much. You know, I remember my first year competing in NNL Worlds. It was 2017, right? And it was right after I had an unfortunate accident. There was a massage therapist who tore my hamstring and calf, and that's a whole other story, right? But I remember, you remember that, you were there, and that was my first ever Worlds. And I remember being like, this just happened, but like, this is worlds. This is where I get to meet everyone. You have to go to NNL worlds. You can't skip this, right? Because it is very much the mentality of our sport is like, send it all the time. So I decided to send it, and it was not a good move. And my leg gave out on that first obstacle. And I remember rolling off the steps into Kara's lap and just like crying, right? Because that was, and we'll talk more about that. But I think, for me, I was overtraining and I was competing when I shouldn't be, because I think that there's this expectation almost in our sport and athletes in general, where you need to work harder all the time. You need to be the best. You need to compete with other people. You need to, if you're not doing as well, you're not working hard enough. And I think too, with there being this aspect of constant competitions, we don't really get the time to rest properly. And then you get right out of competition season and you're applying for the show, and then maybe you're getting ready to compete on the show, and then I feel like there's a little bit of an element of trying to impress people who have been on the show, right? I know, I'll admit it, for me in 2017, that was my first time. That was me. I'm like, oh my God, I get to meet like Grant McCartney. Cool. I'm going to go and I'm going to do this, right? Because I didn't know any of these people at that point in time. And, now they're friends. Now I don't care. But yeah, so I think those are some of the things that I see frequently with athletes in the community. Oh, and one more piece I should mention now too, with the teens being in the adult division now, I know for many of the adults that I train, there is also this element of needing to keep up with people who are much younger than you and at a different ability level. And a lot of people I've seen leaving the community because they're like, I can't keep up. Like my body physically cannot handle what I feel like I need to do to be competitive with 15, 16-year-olds,
Oh yeah, you hit the nail on the head for sure.
All the things.
All the things. Yeah. And, I've said this on the podcast a million times, so I'm not going to hash out the whole story. But when I dislocated my shoulder, I was very much in that same place of like, I'm going. I competed on ANW 11, right? 11,
Mm-hmm.
and then tested in Tacoma, did awesome. Then flew over to test in Vegas and was doing awesome. Like literally Adam Sheldon, the testing coordinator, was like, you're going to get a full course run on stage 1 tomorrow night. Like, be ready. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be ready. Like, if anybody knows what I'm talking about, that's like awesome. And it was that night, like a few minutes later, that I was testing on stage 2. And not that this, I've said this story before, but like, I knew I was exhausted. I knew my body was physically hurting because I just was overtraining, not even just that week, but for months and months before that. So when I got on that obstacle and dislocated my shoulder on something that seemed very simple, it was like a giant rope swing. It was the impact and all that it was just, one straw too many, whatever that saying is.
Right.
Last straw, like one, the last drop in the bucket to like make it overflow. So this is a real thing. It's not just for like old people who shouldn't be doing ninja. No, this is like, this is for people who are young, people who are training, who it's not just like, oh, that you must have had a pre-existing thing or you must have been old. Like, I just want to put in perspective for some of the younger people listening too. Like, this can happen to anyone if you're putting yourself in this type of a situation.
Yeah. And I think often, especially when we're young, it's really easy to do that go thing. And it's often celebrated. I think, especially when we get to more competitive levels, we celebrate people for how like disciplined, quote unquote, we think they are, how hard they're working, how, that no pain, no gain mentality. And just to give you an example, this was pre-ninja for me. I was a competitive track athlete growing up, right? And I remember the first time that I lost my period because I was training so hard. And all the other girls were like, well, one, they're like, that's period sucks. So like, cool, great, you lost it. But like, 2, the mentality was, wow, you're so hardcore. Like you just did that. That's so cool. And that was celebrated. And something we're seeing now more and more among teenage athletes, especially female athletes, we see what's called like the female triad, right? So hormone imbalances, osteoporosis, so bone density changing, you're at increased risk for stress fractures, tendonitis. I had all the signs and nobody said, hey, this is a problem. Everybody celebrated me for how hardcore I was. And, even switching from that into when I was doing competitive OCR before Ninja, it was the same thing. Let's get oxygen deprivation mask. Let's go hike 10 miles up a mountain with heavy backpacks. And there were overtraining symptoms everywhere among all of us, but it was, how hard can you push yourself? How hardcore can you be? And, you know, for a lot of us who were younger, it was like, yeah, this hasn't caught up with me yet. I'm fine. But I was ignoring these things like hormone imbalances and how that was impacting my overall health, right? Because it's not just about how well you compete or how strong you are. It's about your real health. And I ignored it because I just wanted to be strong and I wanted to do cool things and I wanted to be the best. And so now I've really reached a point in my training and in my coaching where I'm having people take a step back and build awareness of these things.
Right. Because it's not like we're trying to say like, oh, you can't train hard.
Right.
You can't, we want you to consider yourself an athlete, and really go after your goals and learn how to push your body, but there's a safe and a healthy way to do that.
Correct.
Yeah. So what do you think would be some signs of overtraining or even just not having a healthy perspective on what hard training should look like or could look like for you?
Yeah. So ninja is interesting because ninja is very intense and very total body all the time. When you look at other sports like bodybuilding or powerlifting, for example, there's splits, right? Like you're going to focus on this part of the body, you're going to take these rest days and you're going to divide it up. Ninja is very like, well, I worked grip endurance yesterday, so let me work grip laches today, right? Or like, did my hands rip, and that's, yeah, right. I'm not wrong. So that I think that's a big part of it is people not knowing how to properly split up training or loving the big moves, right? The laches, the warp walls, those types of things so much, or feeling like they're not good at some of those things. So they need to do more. They need to work on those specific things more rather than taking a step back and working on more like conditioning and foundational work to then get better at those things. So I think what happens is that we don't have that. We don't have those splits, and ninja is a very social thing as well. So we tend to be in the gym all the time. We tend to be in the gym a lot. And then we're trying to keep up with other people that are sending cool moves. And we're like, okay, let me do that too. So some signs of overtraining, for example, you could find that you're not recovering as quickly. And what I mean by that is you are very sore for a very long time. So it's not just like, okay, I worked out hard yesterday, I'm sore the next day, but maybe you're still sore like 2-3 days in. And again, we kind of look at that soreness as a badge of honor, right? Like I worked out hard, I'm super sore. But if your soreness is not going away and it's inhibiting your ability to go back to training, chances are you might be overtraining. Hormone imbalances are another thing that can occur. So when you're overtraining, one, your stress levels are increased. So cortisol levels are high, which can actually lead to a decrease in muscle tissue. It can lead to an increase in injury risk. It can lead to a whole bunch of things, but we don't often notice. We don't know how to look for hormones. Sometimes that can be something as simple as like your face is suddenly breaking out when that's never happened before. Or it could be something like you're having trouble sleeping, you're noticing like huge differences in your period, maybe for our female athletes, no flow, overflow, little flow, stuff like that. You might find yourself not performing as well as you used to. And I've seen people say, I'm training so much, why can I still not, I don't know, do the warped wall? Or like, I used to be good at the warped wall, why can't I do this now? And that's because your body's trying to keep up with the demand. And for many of us, it's also possible that we're not getting enough nutrients in as well, or enough food. Because I hear something a lot in ninja that makes me worry about that, which is that I just need to be lighter to do better, right? Have you heard that?
Yeah, I've definitely heard that. And it's like, okay, it's a delicate conversation because
Yes.
theoretically, sure, we are doing a sport where you're pulling around your own body weight all the time.
Right.
So if you were lighter, okay, sure, but you still need, the muscle mass to support your body through those
Correct.
movements. And so if you want to look at it like, I don't know if you want to say like scientifically, like try to figure out what is really the best ratio muscle to your body weight, all that. If you know someone who's a professional who can really help you look at your training schedule and figure out something like that, that's a plan,
Correct.
great. But I think that too often what's happening, or what I'm observing personally, is that people are just like, I just need to cut more, I just need to get lighter, and then I'll be a better ninja. And it becomes this really obsessive desire or goal to just be lighter so that you can move easier on the course or whatever. And we're celebrating that, which again, like I'm all for us being athletic and as great athletes as we can. But I don't think being the best athlete you can be comes from a root of depriving your body of what you need to eat or overtraining and doing these things, because I've seen it go south a lot.
I could not agree more. And I think what's happening too is there's this combination of like, I just need to be lighter. So you're cutting back on certain things while you're simultaneously overtraining. And so what's happening is your body's now breaking down the muscle that you're trying to build. So you're going to actually have a harder time with things like endurance and agility and power. And so if you find that happening and you're like, why I'm training all the time, that might be a good sign. And the other thing too is we tend to compare ourselves to others a lot, right? So we think, okay, I want to be as good as this person. This person's in the gym training, let's say 6 days a week, right? 6 days might be the sweet spot for that person. It might not be the sweet spot for you because you can train the exact same way as somebody else. Like one of the best athletes out there gave you their exact meal plan and their exact workout schedule and everything. You could follow it to a T and still not get the same results as them. And I think sometimes we say, okay, I need to be more intense. I need to do more things. And again, we're not saying, don't push yourself, don't be an athlete, but we're just saying, do what makes the most sense for you and your body. And I think so often we get these warning signs, but we ignore them because being the best, feeling good, so many of us get our sense of identity from the ninja community, whether or not we like to admit it. And I think we prioritize that above all else. And so it's kind of like you're driving your car and the warning lights come on, like your brake lights are on, you got to fix your brakes. And we're like, it's just like a little inconvenient. It's fine. So you keep driving it because you're trying to keep up with all these other ninjas that are driving their cars. And then now it's not just your brakes. It's like, you need new rotors, you need power steerings out, right? Like all the things. And I think we ignore it because we just want to do what everybody else is doing and keep up with them and what picture we have in our heads of how we should be as athletes.
Yeah. And that was well said. The thing I wanted to add was exactly what you're saying about how you could follow somebody else's training schedule and try to do it, and it might not have the same result. In Ninja, especially for those of us who are, I don't know what generations, I always try to like figure out the right name, like later millennials, older millennials, or like people older than millennials. We tend to like, maybe we had a gymnastics background, maybe we had a track background, maybe we had a climbing background, maybe we had no background in sports, but younger millennials or Gen Z who are part of Ninja now, a lot of them Ninja has been their sport this whole time,
right?
Or they went straight from gymnastics right into Ninja because, as we know, Ninja hasn't existed in America for
right.
as long. And so I think for some of us who don't have such a strong foundation in upper body explosive strength, yes. I've had that experience where I'm going to pick on Abby Clark because I know she won't mind, or even Rachel Degutz, both of them gymnastics background. And I've talked to them about this before. They have a gymnastics background. What they can do like seemingly naturally is different than what I can do. I've had to train to even be on a competitive level with them. Whereas some of their natural skill set and the way that they can train more, like more hours during the week doing certain things that I know I have to take a break from. My body just does not have that same foundation of training that theirs has had from a very young age. Totally not the same. The only things I did growing up were like soccer for like a year. I did volleyball for a long time, some track and fields, but that's it. And they were all lower body things except for like some of volleyball technically. So it's like, it's just very different compared to like a gymnastics background. So that's what we mean when we say you can't just follow somebody else's training schedule. Even if you did have the same background, still your like biology of exactly how your hormones and everything is made up is going to still give you a different result. So I just wanted to reiterate that to like expand your perspective on like what is going on here. Because when we compare, like you said, you're not just comparing like, the surface level of what's happening. You're not seeing like the whole background of what that person has experienced their whole life up till this moment. And all of that plays a fact into it when you're looking at athletics.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, this is our soapbox. Can you tell? We get like fired up about this. Another thing I just want to throw out there real quick is later on the podcast this fall, Sarah Avery will be back on talking more specifically about female hormones and how that affects our training or overtraining, how that affects our hormones. And so we will get more specific into that if you're wondering more about what are warning signs or how could you help correct some of the issues you might be experiencing, we're going to get into that more specifically with Sarah. So if anyone has questions, you could always DM me and we'll work it into the episode. All right, that was my plug.
I think definitely it's also important to talk about how when we notice those warning lights that I was just talking about, I think a lot of times we ignore them or we try to work through them, not around them. So the example I like to give is, if I remember this correctly, I think I heard Jessie Graff talking about when she tore her ACL, that's when she got really good at pull-ups, right? Because she was like, okay, I'm going to just get really strong upper body wise. And that would be an example of working around an injury, right? Eventually you get to the point where you want to start. If you tore your ACL, something probably happened, right? It might be a freak accident that happened, but it might also be a warning light. It might be a warning sign of, are you overtraining? Do you not have the right stability muscles? Is something, a lot of things start in our feet. We don't even know that. We don't even think about that, right? Like feet strength, feet imbalances, all those things. So an injury is a really great time to pay attention to those warning signs you might be avoiding. But you can also work on strengthening other things at the same time, like she did with pull-ups. What I see in the ninja community a lot is working through an injury instead of around it. So what I mean by that is, I tore my ACL, let me do laches, because that's an upper body thing. And let me just hope that I don't land on my leg, right? So that's a big difference. Have you seen that too?
Yeah, and it's not any one person. We're not trying to pick on anybody. If you're like, oh,
It's
did
like
they see me doing
everyone.
that? Did they see me doing that? No, a lot of people.
I'm
I
guilty.
feel like everyone I know. And yes, I don't want to cut off your story if you had more to say, but
No, you're good.
when I again, right before Baltimore, in between season 10 and 11, I messed up my ankle super bad and I had a hairline fracture in my tibia. It was like a whole thing.
Remember
It
that, yeah.
was intense. I wasn't able to do NNL Worlds that season, but basically when it first happened, I was obviously very upset, experiencing all of the athlete injury emotions of like feeling depressed, feeling
Yes.
like a weird sense of like guilty, like why did I mess up in this moment? If I just did this, I wouldn't have fallen, and blah blah blah. And then also feeling like, wow, now I suck, now I can't do anything, I just suck. Like just like those feelings of like, great. And so I really had to force myself to take a real break, but I honestly also was very sad. I felt really upset, and but I was in a lot of pain. I think the fracture with all of the torn ligaments, like they were considering me for surgery. I ended up wasn't requiring surgery, but I was in pain, and so even just standing at all, being upright, was painful. So for the first 2 weeks, I really did just lie on my couch and do nothing, and I'm grateful that I did that. I think I really needed that. And eventually, I was one of those people hanging from the cliffhangers in my living room, just like doing pull-ups and then coming back to like a gentle standing position in my boot. My PTs didn't love that right away. But after they wanted me to rest more, I tried to be as conservative as possible for the first few weeks, but once the pain was not so bad and I was doing more active therapy in PT, they were like, don't try to jump, don't try to drop from anything, like be smart, but sure, if you want to stand there, grab a bar, do your thing, come back down, but don't go to the gym, don't go to like a tempting place, do it somewhere that's like a really controlled environment, like in PT. Sometimes they would help spot me and let me do what I wanted to do on the bar. But I think it's like, again, we're not trying to be like, you can't do blah, like we're not trying to like be those people who are like your moms right now, but just the whole point of like, we need to tone it down sometimes and realize that your body needs time to rest and to heal. I know that I needed to lie on the couch and do nothing the first couple weeks, and I tried to do that as much as I could settle down and do that. But there's also a difference between just going back to the gym when you're in a boot or crutches and being like, well, let me just see what I can do, versus like that's tempting. And there's mats everywhere. You know how easy it is to like get snagged on a mat and like screw yourself over. So it's like, if you have like a bar at home and you can have someone help you, make sure you're not going to fall over when you're trying to like get back down. That's a little different than just like going to the gym and like just hoping that you don't get tempted to try something you probably shouldn't try, So again, it's like, I just want to encourage us to use some more wisdom when it comes to recovery.
Yes, I think that's a really important piece I want to talk about, because I want to talk about that mental health aspect as well, what you were feeling. But I totally agree. Like, I'm not saying don't work out, right? But there's a big difference between like, I'm going to do pull-ups and I'm going to send something that has a landing where I could potentially get hurt. I think what happens a lot is ninja's fun, right? A lot of us who do ninja don't love traditional exercise, like lifting, rehab exercise. Like, a lot of people do ninja just because it's different, it's fun. A lot of us do love things. Maybe we come from like CrossFit, bodybuilding, powerlifting. We love throwing around weights. Regardless, I don't think anyone really likes doing the foundational work. We like to do the things that are fun, where we can connect with other people, that make us feel strong, that make us feel good, right? We like hitting those PRs all the time, and we ignore the foundations. And so I think injury is a really great time to go back to that foundational work. Like, how is your core strength? How is your mobility? How are your stability muscles? And so exactly, like, if you have an injury, this is a great time to work on something that you might have been avoiding because it's not as fun, but you were able to do those big moves, right? So thinking about rotator cuff exercises, for an example, a lot of us come into ninja not knowing how our overhead mobility is, not knowing how strong our rotator cuffs are. And I'll talk more about that later, but we know when I started ninja, I had horrible kyphosis and scoliosis. So for anyone who doesn't know what that is, my back was rounded, my spine was crooked, my overhead mobility was like, could not reach straight above my head. And I went right into like, I could do pull-ups already. So I went right into, let's do salmon ladder, let's do laches, let's do these big impact moves when I didn't have the foundation for it. And I tore my lat in a competition. And I remember another ninja saying, well, look at your overhead mobility. Like, that should be addressed before you just do all these ninja comps. And I was so mad. It was not what I wanted to hear at the time. And like, she might be listening to this and know exactly what I'm talking about, but I did not want to hear it. I was like, no, like, I can do this. I don't want to take the time that it's going to have to take to work on that and to recover and build those muscles. And it wasn't until I tore the lat and I felt like I was starting all over. And I want to again talk about that mental health piece in a second, but it wasn't until that happened that it forced me to go back and do that foundational stuff that I'd been avoiding. And you know what? When I really took time, I mean real time off ninja, I came back so much stronger than when I was constantly trying to work through or around these injuries. Because one of the things that happens is we get so afraid of losing progress. We get so afraid of not keeping up with everyone else. You know, we go through, when an athlete goes through an injury, we go through the normal stages of grief that you would go through if you lost a loved one. Like, if somebody were to die, you go through that same process. So you start with that denial, right? Like, this didn't really happen. How did this happen? Why me? Exactly. Like, should I have done something differently? And so I think part of us going to tempting places like a ninja gym is that sense of normalcy of like, this didn't actually happen. I can still go to ninja like normal. I can still do these things. But then what happens is we're putting ourselves in positions that we might not be ready for yet, or that allow us to continue to ignore other things. And do you want to jump in on that real quick, or?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, you're totally right. And even as I'll let you continue, but even as you're explaining, I'm rethinking the timeline of that year. And I forgive me if you've heard the story already. I don't know if I've ever quite put the whole timeline this way, but yeah, I messed up my ankle in January, recovered, trained really hard to get ready for Baltimore, A&W, which was, I guess, March or April.
Yeah.
April, I guess. Then I tested 2 weeks later in Tacoma. Then like 3 or 4 weeks later, I was testing in Vegas. That's where I hurt my shoulder. So from January to June was the season of like, I got injured, working around my injury, like trying to get through it, trying to get better, telling myself like literally in my brain in Vegas, I have to do this. I feel terrible. I have to do this. I have to prove myself. And it's for people who've been a part of A&W or been trying to, you know, in the back of your mind, there's this pressure of I have to prove myself to the producers or for my casting video or to these other ninjas I look up to who I want to show that I am capable of doing this. So it was all of that, like everything you're describing from like day one of injury, but then the pressure of like getting back. But then again, trying to recap really quick, June, August, I had my shoulder surgery. Then from August all the way through to the spring for like 9 months. I was recovering from surgery in PT. Corona happened, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, once I finally did get back to ninja training, which was probably delayed a little bit more because of COVID. I was training at home. We were doing workouts online and stuff. But when I actually got back to really doing ninja, I've been at the best I've ever been doing ninja because of those things that you're saying. I learned the basics of like, what should I actually be doing to support my rotator cuff and support my shoulders in a healthy way. And I still do those exercises now at home here in the gym, because I know that's what I need to keep my body healthy. And also on a quick hormone piece, which I won't get into this really deeply, but when I got injured, and then that spring when I was training for Baltimore, like I said, I know I was overtraining. I never had an appetite, which I still ate a lot of food because I knew that I needed to for ninja, because eating disorder, like been there, done that. I already knew that this was like a bad pitfall for me. So I was like, you have to eat, Kara, you're going to eat whether you're hungry or not. And so I would come home from training, I would eat, but I never had an appetite. After I got injured, I ended up taking all that time off because of the surgery and all this stuff. And then finally, like during that summer before surgery, I got my appetite back. So this is probably like 6 weeks of not training, and then was feeling better, like in that sense, while I was recovering. I ended up losing probably 10 pounds because of the surgery and all that time off and everything. But I'm not saying this in a way to be like, look at me, but I never gained all that weight back. But I'm stronger and healthier now. I really think that my hormones were so off that I wasn't hungry. My, metabolism was probably not where it should have been. I just like, things were wrong. And so like, I'm saying that as like, these were warning signs I should have been paying attention to. And the fact that my appetite came back, and then I would train and be hungry, that was like, oh, good, I'm where I need to be. And I was eating all these things. And so it's like, just to bring it full circle, if you are so anxious about, I have to be my best, I can't take a rest, I can't do this, that's where I was. And again, now that I'm like, I need to take rest when I need to take days off, I need to do like the basics and keep switching my training. Now it's like, I know I'm physically, my body is in a better place because I've been like finally listening to its demands, like what I need to do. So I know that was like big story, but like, this is why this stuff means so much to me, because I've lived it, and I don't want other people to have to make the same mistakes that we've made in order to learn the same lesson.
Yeah. And I'm happy you shared that too, because I think so many people listening can probably relate to that. Even as you were talking, I was like, oh my God, you're going through this timeline. I'm like, this is me. Right. So and I'll go back to the stages of grief in a second, but you know, when that lat tear happened, for example, that was also right before COVID. And that was right before I was supposed to also film for A&W. And I remember, so I tore my lat at the Arnold. Okay. And I want to give you like a quick backstory on that. So I tore my lat at the Arnold, which was for anyone who doesn't know, it was a speed comp, and it was like you could go as many times as you wanted. And so we, again, got in our heads, right? So other people were going 5, 6, 7, 8 times and we're beating out my time. And it's like, no, can't let that happen. So I'm going. And I remember, I think Casey was with me at the time, and she was like, you need to take a break. Like, you need to stop. And I was like, no, like I have to keep going. Right. And I was clearly like past that point. I also came into that was recovering from that hamstring injury still. Like I'm still recovering from that hamstring injury, to be honest, because I didn't take a break right when it happened. That being said, what that led to was a knee injury on my other side, because I was working through, not around, right? And knee injury on my other side. So what happened was I went to go jump, and I didn't have the strength in my legs to make the jump properly because my knee was shaking at that point. I had it all wrapped, everything, made the jump, didn't grab it properly, tore my lat. Now I'm trying to get my lat recovered for filming. I knew it wasn't a good idea, but the same thing. It's like, have to prove it to the producers, have to be ready. I'm not going to lie. I was happy when they said filming was canceled, like selfishly, because I knew I wasn't ready. And that was a warning sign. Not that I wasn't ready to be on the show, but I knew that my body wasn't healed enough. And I was pushing myself to do something I wasn't ready to do on somebody else's timeline. A lot of times we do things on timelines, like for competitions or for filming. And I know I talked to a couple other people that were like, oh my gosh, I'm happy. I needed a break. If you're at that point where something that you really look forward to getting canceled is relieving to you, that was probably a sign that you needed a break and should have taken one. But if that hadn't happened, like, I don't know, would I have competed? Would I have injured something else? I don't know. And that was a big wake up call for me now, where I really am trying to listen to my body more. But I was just in so much denial, I think, at that time, where it was like, I have to keep going. I have to keep doing these things. Other people could see it and they were calling me out. And I was like, no, I'm hardcore. Like, this is fine. And it wasn't fine. So I think there's a balance, definitely, of being able to train hard and be a competitive athlete, but also being able to feel your best and pay attention to those other things, like your hormones and your appetite,
Yeah, totally. Just talking along the line of like mental health, if it's yourself and you're hearing these stories and these things and you're like, oh, this kind of resonates with me, like maybe I am that person. Do you have any advice for someone listening who might feel like it's them, or even maybe you have a friend who you're like, I don't know, but I really think so and so, this person seems like they're overdoing it, and I like, maybe you know them personally, how could you talk to them about it?
Yeah. So I think one of the things is that we're ninjas, but we're more than ninjas. It was funny when we did Neighborhood Ninjas interviews for our mentees, we asked them, like, what's one word that you would use to describe yourself? And every single one of them said ninja. And we were like, okay, give us like a more detailed explanation. Like, who are you? And they were like, I'm a ninja. And I'm like, okay, you can't use the word ninja. And they're like, I like obstacles. And so, but, and we laugh about it and it's cute. But I also think that for so many of us, regardless of our age, at some point, ninja becomes our identity, right? And we're really, it's our social life. A lot of us are dating within the community. We're coaching. I run a nonprofit. I run Neighborhood Ninjas. You run Ninjababes. Like, it is our lives. It is everything. It's our friends. So I think part of it is really figuring out, like, where is this overtraining coming from, right? Do you feel this need to prove yourself? Is this just your social thing? I remember when I found Ninja, it was life-changing to me because I finally found a community where I felt like I belonged. And I know so many people have felt that way. So for me, it's like, I'm going to the gym every single day just because I want to see people and I want to hang out, and they're sending big moves. So now I'm sending big moves. But then I also think there's people who, like we said, they might be masking an eating disorder. They might have an exercise disorder. They might feel like nothing else in their lives is going well. So I remember I was at a really toxic job and I was not happy there. And Ninja was the place that I could go where I felt really strong and empowered. And it was like this whole other side of me that I could bring out. And so I think one of the things I'm actually seeing with a lot of athletes in the community is spending hours and hours and hours at the Ninja gym because they are kind of trying to escape from other areas of their lives. So to answer your question, right, there's so many things. Sometimes it's not just as simple as, I want to be the best, so let me spend 5 hours in the gym. It's so layered. So I think from like a friend or a coach perspective, it's being able to acknowledge that and try to figure out, what else is going on, and encourage them to look at those other pieces of their lives. How can you fix those things, or at least reframe how you feel about those things? And then I think the other piece is, we love celebrating big moves, right? We celebrate big moves, we celebrate 6 sends, but we look at these people that are training all the time as hardcore athletes and we celebrate it. And that's awesome. Like, I'm not saying don't do that, but I think we also need to equally prioritize and celebrate when somebody says, you know what, I'm going to take today off and that doesn't make me weak. I need to rest, or, I'm going to step back and actually be able to encourage that and celebrate it, and not do a lot of what I see, which is kind of almost shaming people. And I'm not saying that everyone, like, I'm not trying to call anyone out by doing this, but I have seen it, right? And if I've seen it, living in Connecticut and going to like Massachusetts and Connecticut gyms, for example, New Jersey, I've gone to a couple states, right? If I've seen it going to like 4 or 5 different states, chances are it's not just happening in those 4 or 5 different states. So again, not calling anyone out, just saying, like, thinking about it as a community. What are we prioritizing? What are we celebrating? How are we supporting each other? I know I've been out of Ninja comps a little bit in the past year. I mean, a lot of people have with COVID and stuff, but one thing I've heard from a lot of people is how the community's almost felt less supportive and more competitive. I don't know if you've felt that.
I've definitely heard that from people who they have felt it. I don't know if I personally have felt that, but again, it might just be my friend group, it might just be where I'm at. But I've heard it from other people. I've heard it from a lot of parents about the younger divisions, is what I've heard.
Parents, definitely. I've heard it from a lot of parents, and I've heard of it for a lot of younger divisions as well. And I think, again, it may not be reflective of the whole community, but it does mean it's happening somewhere. Like if you're not feeling it, I'm not feeling it because I'm not, I haven't been in a gym in a long time, but it means that if I'm hearing about it, you're hearing about it, it's happening. So I think just building that awareness of what is the dialogue, what's the thought process here around how we approach training, and are we creating supportive environments where people can say, I'm going to take a step back, and that's not going to make me weak. It's not going to mean I'm not as much a part of, like, I think the FOMO is real, right? We're so afraid of missing out on things. And so I think it's just important to encourage each other to say, it's okay. You can take a break. Like, you're not missing out. And it doesn't make you weak. Right.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Seriously, it's like just that point of like, it doesn't make you weak. Like, I think we need to hear that. Like, that should be my next shirt that I make for Ninjababes is like, rest doesn't make you weak or something. Like,
rest is productive.
Rest is productive. That's the slogan. I knew I could count on you, Katz.
I got you.
But it's so true. And like, think about it, people listening. You're probably in shock and tell people, because I know I did, of, oh yeah, this one time I didn't get to train for a week, and then when I got to the gym, I got a PR, or I actually had this amazing like epiphany moment. And it's so true. The time after a bunch of injuries and stuff, when I got my best pull-up PR was when I was traveling for some NNL thing. I couldn't train myself for so many days, and then when I finally got to the gym, I hit a pull-up PR like off the bat, and I was like, how did I do that? Oh my gosh, wait, rest really works. What? Like, it was like that moment. So yeah, thanks for saying that. Even just like, how do we handle our warm-ups? I feel like people don't warm up as much as probably should. I mean, not everyone, like, but I feel like in general, it might not be something we prioritize, or maybe our gym coaches haven't really looked at a way to really do a proper shoulder warm up. It's like, jumping jacks and, whatever, like, but are we really getting our bodies warmed up for this explosive pulling that we do constantly?
Yeah, no, totally. I've been in gyms where I've seen the organized warm up be that you're just going to do pull-ups, and I'm like, cool, but what's your warm up to the pull-up? Or you're just going to start running, and like, cool, what's your warm up to the run? And I think, especially when we're younger, we can get away with that, but you won't feel the effects of that when you're younger. You feel that when you're older. I say, as somebody who like did not stretch after track practice and, do all these things. So I'm a big fan of making sure you have proper rotator cuff strength. You're activating your shoulders, getting your core activated. Your warped walls are going to be so much more effective if you activate your glutes beforehand. I don't know if y'all know that, but you don't get better at warped walls by running at the warped wall. You get better at warped walls by working on explosive strength and glute strength and calf strength and all those things. And just honestly, do some banded glute bridges before you do your warped wall. Do some sideways squat walks. Like, honestly, don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Do your own thing. I think I used to go into gyms and do the warm up everyone else is doing because that's what we do and you want to fit in, right? Whatever. I started doing my own stuff and I leveled up so much. And it wasn't until I got injured that I was like, wait, why have I been doing this for so long? Let me change that. And suddenly my warp walls were more effective, and suddenly my laches were more effective. And so, it's the small, boring things that really add up. I would not skip that. And I liked what you said about the stuff that you were doing for rehab. You're still doing it, even though you're not injured anymore. And that's so key, because I think a lot of times we get injured, we go to PT, we complete PT, right? And we did the exercises, and now we're quote unquote fixed and we stopped doing it. But you need to think of it as maintenance, not just as rehab, right? It's injury prevention, not just post-vention rehab. Right.
Yeah. Post-vention. Yeah.
Post-vention.
If that's the stuff that got you to be better, it's probably still beneficial to help you be healthy. Right. So yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I also want to say too, real quick, like, I think part of it is talking about that mental health aspect. Like, we stop doing those things because we want to feel normal again, right? I only had to do these rehab exercises while I was injured. I don't want to think about being injured. I just want to go back to normal, whatever quote unquote normal is for you. Maybe that's big moves on warp walls or laches. I always use those as the example. And I kind of started talking earlier about like those stages of grief when you get injured. And I don't want to undermine that, because that's so critical. Like for so many of us, being an athlete is our entire identity, and it's so hard to not be in a ninja gym. And you do go through that stage of like, first you're in denial, and then you're mad, and like what you said, how did this happen, right? And then for those of you who have been in PT, you might relate, because this was me. You go to physical therapy and they're like, exactly what you said. It's like, well, we don't really love you hanging because this is dangerous for your ankle. And then you can you start bargaining, right? Bargaining is one of the stages. And you're like, well, but like, what if I just hang on a really low bar? Or, okay, well, what if I go to the ninja gym and I promise I'll be good and I'll just do these things, right? We're like PT's worst nightmares, because we come in and we're so eager to get better. And they're like, no, slow down, do less for a hot second, right?
Oh yeah, it's so true, because even even just recently I was in a car accident over the summer. If anybody doesn't know, I don't know if I ever said that on the podcast, but I had a bunch of whiplash and all that stuff, had to stop training. And one of the trainers, after I was in PT for a couple weeks and I was past like the I'm in pain point, and it was more like I'm feeling kind of better, like I want to do something now. Once I got to that point, I remember one of the trainers looking at me, and she was like newer, didn't know me as well as some of the other people there, and she was like, I have to watch you. And I was like, huh? And she was like, you're not one of those people who comes in here and I have to like watch them to make them do stuff. She's like, you're the one I have to watch that you don't do too much. And I was like,
Yep.
oh, guilty. Yep, that's me.
Yep.
You figured me out.
Yep. Right. It's so real though. Like so many of us do that. And so then when we think we're past these exercises, like we're better than the exercises we were doing in PT, because we're fixed now and we just want to go back to doing the hard, exciting stuff. And so I can't stress enough, one is don't skip those things. They're important. It's honestly, I've been training ninjas via Zoom for the entire last year, and they took an entire year out of the gym, came back, and they were like, oh, I'm stronger. Oh, my warp wall's better. Oh, I can do a lâché that I couldn't do before. And it's because we were working on those foundational pieces. And then we were also working on their mindset, because I think being out of the gym and facing all those stages, right? Then you get to the next stage, which is the depression stage, which you talked about, kind of being in that space of like, everything sucks. I don't have anything that I normally do. What's wrong with me? How do I heal? So, and then eventually get to this point where like, okay, this is okay. I need to work through this, or you get back to the gym. But I think just, if you have a friend in Ninja who's injured, which anybody listening probably has a friend in Ninja who's injured, please check in on them and just see where they are in this stage, right? I think being able to be like, oh my God, yeah, that sucks. I've been there. That's cool. And it's a good starting point, but kind of see where they are and help them be accountable. Let's be accountable for each other, right? It's not just being accountable to make sure they show up to the gym, because I know we do that. We'll text our friends and be like, hey, training 5:00, be there. But make sure that they're doing okay mentally. Make sure that we're all keeping up with our little resistance band exercises that we don't want to do. Make sure that we are, really thinking about this is a long game, because I've seen a lot of people leave the community already. And it's like, we want to be our best for a long time. We don't want to just burn out real quick and then be like, well, Ninja's too stressful. I'm getting injured. I'm overtraining. I'm done. We want to think of this as like, if you really love this sport and this community, we want to set yourself up for success long term.
Yes, I love that. It's so true. And I really appreciate you stressing that, because yes, we want that. So Alex, is there anything else that you'd like to share? Because pretty soon we're going to jump into our bonus content. And in case you're listening and you're like, what is that? Every episode we have bonus content, which is for our Patreon subscribers only. And it basically means that the episode's going to end in a moment here for our regular listeners. But for those of you who are subscribed to Patreon, you're going to get an extra bonus. And today, honestly, I am really pumped for this, because Alex is going to show us some of her recommended exercises and warm-up things. She'll tell us specifically which it is, but she's going to actually demonstrate what you can do to put all of this, like we're saying, into action. So Alex, is there any last words before we move on to bonus?
I guess what I want to leave people with is that you're doing great. You don't need to compare yourself to other people, even if, you are being compared in terms of times and podiums and qualifying. I think just keep doing what you're doing and just know that you are doing enough. And I think, a lot of times we think we're not doing enough when we're actually doing too much. So just we're not saying don't train hard, but what I am saying is give yourself a lot of compassion in the process and don't skip the boring stuff.
Yes, rest is productive, people.
Rest is productive.
I like that.
I wrote a whole
Okay.
article on it.
Yes. Actually, we'll link to that because we should link to that article.
There's two. There's one on why you need rest, and there's another one on if you are somebody experiencing injury, talking about all those mental health things and things to keep in mind to help get you through that injury process. So definitely recommend reading it.
Yeah, I will link to that in the podcast notes, and I'm sure we'll be sharing it on social media this week when this podcast episode comes out. So, all right. All right, goodbye, listeners. Sorry, I meant to say goodbye before I did that weird hand motion. Goodbye, listeners. If you're here on the regular podcast, it's been awesome having you on. Thank you so much for listening to me, Karaback, and Alex Katz talk all about injury stuff and mindset. And yeah, it's been awesome. So we'll check you soon on the next episode. And right now, we're going to jump into bonus content for Patreon people.
Be strong, be you, be a Ninja Babe.